Welcome to the Produce on Purpose podcast, where we experience life being the real you. I'm your host, Randy Adkins Jr., author, teacher, speaker, preacher, and lifelong learner. We have Peter Teuscher with us today. He's a seasoned business and life coach whose book, Rethinking Happiness, delves into the complexities of happiness and offers a refreshing perspective on how individuals can achieve it on their own terms. His approach aligns with the goals to go beyond superficial checklists and embrace deeper, more meaningful changes that foster genuine mental health and well-being. Peter draws from his experience as an entrepreneur, executive in the corporate world, life, business, basketball coach, a leadership trainer, and author. Peter's personal development journey really kicked off when he faced serious mental health issues in his early 30s. He uses his diverse background and experience to help others discover their highest potential by becoming aware and changing the thoughts, beliefs, and habits that stand in their way. Peter, welcome to the Produce on Purpose podcast. How are you this day?
I'm doing great, Randy. I'm really grateful to be with you today.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you on, and I am excited for this conversation. I remember in the pre-call, we talked a little bit about some about your transition. So I'm going to start there and ask a question about that. So can you share that pivotal moment which led you from transitioning from that successful corporate career to becoming a life coach, and how did you navigate that significant change in your life?
That change was fairly gradual. I think my shift in perspective happened much sooner than that. But I found myself in a situation where I enjoyed my work, but I really enjoyed more being able to mentor people, pass on sort of the experience and information that I'd learned. And it kind of went back to the first seed was planted when I first was coaching basketball, was coaching high school. And you have a couple of those players that you somehow they spend a little more time talking to you about their challenges outside of basketball, and I found that was really gratifying. And somewhere I thought down the road, eventually, maybe I'll get there. And through my corporate life, I'd done different types of training, different types of coaching, as a leader of teams, and then I ended up getting certified as a systemic coach, which then I allowed me to part-time slowly build up a coaching practice alongside sort of the corporate work that I did. So for me, it was quite a gradual change. The seed was planted very early when I was learning, when I was kind of at the early stage of my own growth and development, this shift that I was making in my life. I was starting to pass that information on, but I think I didn't really fully embrace that role until about 10 years ago.
And it's interesting how all of the different things we end up doing, whether it's career, sometimes it could be extracurricular activities, service activities that we do that end up helping us in whatever we're doing next. And I always find that our purpose and who we are ends up shining in all of these areas. It's just expressed a little differently. So, of course, we're on the Produce on Purpose podcast. So I want to understand your personal growth journey and maybe what you have defined and have as your purpose. How's that influenced your approach to coaching and helping others?
Yeah. So I guess where do we want to start? Where I made my shift, I think my purpose has been clear to me for a while. I like to inspire people through my words. So I love to write. I like having these conversations. So inspiring others through my words. And then, the other piece that comes through the coaching is accompanying people on their journey of change, personal development, and self-awareness. So I think they both kind of fulfill very similar needs, but they're just two different modalities or ways of reaching people.
Yeah. And, it's really fun to be able to kind of share those, that kind of journey as you kind of go along. So you talked a little bit about facing some mental health issues in your early 30s. Can you share a little bit about that and how you overcame any challenges related to that and strategies maybe that will be helpful for the audience that's listening?
Sure. I've gotten a lot more comfortable talking about it over the years. It used to be I was very, very private about that. But look, I think in my early 30s, it reached a climax. And it was when I actually started to understand and become more aware of what was going on internally. But it was at a point where I really needed to, well, it was at a point where I was having to decide, do I want to continue with my life, or do I get some help and get some change? And it was only through, seeking some therapy and exploring different things. I started doing yoga for some chronic back pain I was having. I started to learn meditation, but I also went through some therapy. And through that therapy, we realized, well, we basically looked back to my childhood and realized my first depressive episodes were when I was, 7 years old in grade 2. And so, I realized that what I was experiencing throughout my childhood, my youth, and even in my 20s, was not this, what I deemed to be, chronic laziness, or these kind of personal flaws that I had, or these, just these deficiencies that I was born with. Instead, I realized, I had built up a lot of, there was some things that I didn't realize were trauma that, that I needed to deal with. But also I had built up all these negative beliefs about myself. And when I changed those and the habitual ways of thinking, that's when the big shift happened for me. That's when I realized I had control of that and the ability to change that's what changed. But I was in a very dark place, even though from the outside it looked like I had a great life. My brother and I had built up this our own business. We were having a lot of fun, and people really, in a lot of people's situations, it looks from the outside really great. But when I got home by myself in my apartment, I was really, really, really unhappy, to the point where I got to a period where I had trouble getting out of bed. I had days that I didn't leave my apartment. I was very self-destructive, which wasn't really fair to my brother in the business, and so that also developed a huge amount of guilt for me. I think the other thing that I realized through that transition was, in my throughout my youth, in my 20s, I was very much, I thought I had a very scientific view of the world. I thought everything was based on facts, and I really shunned any kind of spiritual beliefs. And I realized through my transition there that was a big piece that was missing for me as well. So yeah, I guess a lot of different things coming together all at once to make me aware that I really needed to make a shift in my life.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think sometimes the measure in life is all about what we're doing externally and kind of how we're making everything look to everyone else.
Yeah.
And, my wife does, she's a psychiatric PA. And so the question sometimes people ask is, are you depressed? And that's like the wrong question. The question is, has your activities changed? Do you like to do what you always like to do? And then if you find yourself in a place where there is that place where you can't even get out of bed, where you were able to get out of bed before, something changed, something shifted. And I'm so glad you shared that you were able to get help. And of course, my encouragement to everyone is always, seek out that help and seek out those safe places to have that conversation. And it is important to have safe places. That means that you're going to people who are not judging, but they're listening, and you're able to kind of walk through and talk that out. So thank you for passing that along, sharing that. I think it's helpful when we start to talk about your book. So you talk about rethinking happiness, and you emphasize happiness isn't about the big moments, but it's about daily choices. Can you elaborate on this concept and how it applies to everyday life?
Yeah, I think an important thing about happiness is, first of all, to define what it means to you. And for me, I think, we all have this sort of inner guidance system, this emotional feedback that tells us, if we're on track, if we're living in alignment with our values and our deeper needs. And for me, that's what happiness is that feedback in life. So if we're feeling really happy in the moment, then it's those moments of authentic happiness and joy, not this dopamine spike where, we're having a fantastic vacation or we've reached this great milestone. But there are just so many other moments of in everyday life where we can experience joy and happiness. And I think when we're feeling that, that's the feedback, that's life telling us that we're living in alignment with our deeper needs, our values, and or that we're perceiving the world in a way. Because it may not be that anything's wrong, but you may be just the way you're looking at the world is in a very negative light. That's creating that that negative feedback for you. So when we look at happiness as this confirmation of the way, or this confirmation, we're either living in a way that's in alignment with what we need, or living against it. That's really the way I define happiness, and that's what I use to guide my choices in life. So,
and a portion of that means you have to be true to yourself. That in this moment, I did not feel good about what just happened. I'm not going to tell myself a story that says I was happy. No, you are really truly saying, do I align with this particular moment, what this time is? And if I do align with this moment, I want to have more of those moments. And then if I don't align with the moment, I want to have less of those moments. So I want to kind of keep in that space on a daily, whatever's happening in my daily life. So that's definitely an interesting take, because I think sometimes happiness and joy is overlooked by maybe sometimes the stories we may be sharing behind the scenes, instead of just saying, in this moment, did this actually give me energy, or did it actually take away some type of energy in my life? So as we are trying to navigate our daily lives, and as we're trying to rethink this happiness, what are some daily actions we can do to start to align with that happiness within us?
Well, there's certainly some good daily habits you can do, but whenever anyone's trying to get some clarity on what the best sort of way for them to live, because I don't think there's one right way for everyone to live. I think everyone has their own unique experiences, which is a great thing. But I'd say when you're trying to figure out the changes you want to make in your day to day, looking at it from different angles that's why I work systemically. I take different perspectives on it. But I think you can ask I have a very simple approach that I use when it comes to choice making, and when it comes to the way I'm responding to the world, and that is a simple binary. Am I doing this out of love or out of fear? And I think, look, those two words mean something to me. For some people, it's positive energy and negative energy, whatever. But recognizing the motivation behind the actions you're taking and the choices you're making in your life, because if you're recognizing that you keep making these choices and they keep leading you to these same outcomes that don't fulfill you and don't make you happy and don't bring joy into your life, I think that's a clear sign that there's something off. And a lot of times, the reason we make those choices is based on fear. We never make the best decisions when we're in a fear state. Fear can be a strong motivator; it can get you into action, but a lot of the times the outcomes won't necessarily be where you want to go. So I think that recognizing the actions that you're taking out of fear is a great first step. And then in terms of day-to-day well-being, I think having some good rituals or some good routines in your life is really helpful. For me, I start each day with a meditation and getting my body into motion. Those are things that make you feel physically and mentally good, and then they help you get a clear perspective on the next steps you want to take in your day, or they'll help you stay out of fear when you're trying to make choices. So that's a great one. And then, or you can, or in addition, you can do some really good evening routines. And for me, that means, gratitude. I like to reflect on the things I'm grateful for in the day. Gratitude is such a great mood changer, but it also helps reinforce all the positive things in your life. When you go end your day in that way, often that carries over into the next morning, and it makes it easier for you to have another positive start the next day. So those are some very basic things that I do. But again, it takes some self-awareness and self-reflection.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that fear can be a motivator, and that sometimes I think many of us believe, because fear maybe has gotten to us some semblance of success, that's what we have to move forward. However, I know even in my personal journey that fear may have been a motivator and they could have gotten some successes, but they're always temporary. And then when you actually do anything motivated in love, it seems to actually have a different, more fulfilling way of feeling as we move forward. And I just wanted to point that out, that you said that, because I believe many believe that there's one way or another, and one way is better, and this and that. It's like, no, this is the difference is you can choose to do something out of fear. It's just going to typically be temporary, or you could choose to do something out of love, which will sustain and be longer lasting in what you do. And so then you touched on, I think, a very important piece of life. And it sounds like gratitude is something that you share, and that you mentioned the importance of reflecting on that. And so how do you feel that having gratitude has kind of changed either your perspective or your mood or your thinking about life as you've kind of gone through? And maybe this will be helpful for someone who has that busy lifestyle and is doing all of these different things. How's gratitude helped you?
Well, we tend to, when we have certain thoughts, we tend to attract more of those thoughts. Our brain works in that kind of networking way. You think about something, or you try not to think about something, and it'll attract more similar thoughts. So I find that a very basic approach to life when you're trying to see the world in a more positive way, which then in turn makes you feel better. Having that gratitude practice will attract more things. You'll start to notice more things that are good in your life, which is really great when you're down on things, because compared to some parts of the world, we actually live in times where we have it pretty good for the most part, but we focus on the things that are going wrong. And I this is something that I recognize in people who are super successful and have wealth and all the comforts that life can offer, and yet they are unhappy or easily frustrated and easily triggered to anger. Those kind of things are not going to make them happy, and not going to make anyone happy. So when you can start to, because the thing is, when I talk to people also about meditation, they go, "Oh, can I get rid of my thoughts?" No, the thoughts will come, but what you have power over is where you give your attention to. And the gratitude practice helps you give your attention to those things that are going well for you, or that you can appreciate. And it's not about sticking your head in the sand and ignoring the bad stuff, but we tend to look at all those things that are going wrong and overlook a lot of the things that are going right. And it's about finding more balance in our life, right? So when you take control of the things that you pay attention to, you'll find lots of things to have gratitude and appreciation for.
It's just like an athlete, or those that are at the top of their list, musician, whomever. In order for you to be the best of the best, you practice. And it sounds to me like, Coach, you're telling me I need to be able to practice. I need to practice on focusing on the things that are either we're grateful for, the things that are great in this world. And if we learn to focus on those items, actually sounds like your perspective of life actually may shift based on what you are focused on consistently. How can we, based on all of this stuff that's happening in the world, like you said before, there's negativity out there, and then there's the positive pieces. And I've heard in my life, people are like, well, you're not living in reality if you don't pay attention to the negative stuff. How can we combat that as we're moving into a more gratitude type of thinking, more happiness thinking, more thinking on along the ways of things that are positive?
Well, when it comes to solutions, I always look, people sometimes they attack problems with these, or they get upset about things that they have no control over. So start first with what can you control, and one of the things you can control is your environment. How much media you consume. Are you surrounding yourself with negative people who complain a lot? They may be good people, but they have this habit of complaining, just like you may have a habit of complaining in your mind. I think those are really important things. So take control of your environment, the inputs. Your unconscious is always listening, whether it's the things that you're saying about yourself, about other people, the judgments you're making, the negative comments that you're making, recognizing the sort of negative stream of consciousness that you're experiencing. but also, and making a conscious effort to change the way you talk about yourself and the world, and also the inputs that you're giving yourself in terms of the news. It's natural to want to be informed, but we don't need to be inundated. Our parents or the previous generations made it through fine without having a 24-hour news cycle, right?
Yes.
And they didn't need to be doom scrolling on YouTube to be able to be on top of things. And so it's taking control about the amount of content and how negative it is. And those are really important things. And if you don't think it's possible to be in I know people live in sometimes in difficult conditions, but I love giving the example. You may have read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and he lived through a concentration camp. Under the Nazis, it was the most horrific conditions you can imagine. And yet there's this moment he describes in the book where it's this cold winter day and there's this beam of sunlight that warms his face. And in that moment, he has this joy and appreciation just for that thing, even though he's living in totally horrific conditions. And that for me was such an inspiration that, if he can do it, anyone can do it. And in traveling the world, I've been to poor countries. I've seen how people living in difficult conditions can still find joy and happiness just in their community and with each other. That doesn't mean you stop striving for more and better, but it just means you don't get there by being miserable and frustrated with everything that's going on right now. So I think, sorry, I've given you maybe a lot there, but I think look at the things you control, and that's definitely what kind of environment you immerse yourself in. How much negativity is around you and how much negativity is in your mind.
Yeah, what are you putting yourself in? What are the situations that you're putting yourself in and looking at? I can definitely also relate to going to on mission trips to Africa and Honduras, and in those moments you're looking at the situation that's external to them, but then when I start having conversations, they are happy because they have family around them. They're more happy than some of the people that we know in some of what we would call first world countries that have paved roads and water everywhere. We sometimes miss the fact of all that we truly have around us and in front of us. And I do believe that, the environment that you continue to put yourself into, and like you said, the consumption, I think of it like this. I'm like, if you keep putting garbage in front of, on yourself, and every time I'm listening to something, I just put a piece of garbage on me, I'm going to have a hard time moving around. I'm going to have a hard time really kind of seeing what's really going on until I remove all of that garbage. Well, I need to stop putting that garbage in my life and try to make it more clear. And it sounds like if we can have a little more gratitude, a little more of how we look at life, and not try to control things we don't have control over, because why would I try to control someone else or try to control the situation when the best thing I can control is, like what Charles Swindoll said, is my attitude and who I am. So how can we continue to do that and focus on those right things? And it sounds like there's a step that we can all take by just doing a little bit of gratitude, putting ourselves in the right environments that help us to start to navigate and move in a direction that's helpful. So I know you help a lot of people, and that you've been kind of going through the process of as a coach and doing different things that you do, whether it's basketball coaching, life coaching, or business coaching. When you meet someone, what do you tell them as they are starting this journey to make a transformation in what they're doing, whether it's leadership or what they're trying to accomplish? What are some things that you would tell us, Coach?
Well, most people come to me because they're looking to facilitate some kind of change, or they're looking to get some clarity on, what is it that I really want. So this seeking clarity or this seeking change are the two things that people usually are looking for. And in order to do that, I ask them, okay, what is it that when you're making choices and you're taking action in your life, where's that coming from? And then we recognize there are certain strategies that they've been following through their life. And then we can look at, has that led to your success? And then if not, we look at, well, where have those strategies come from? And ultimately they come from these beliefs that you've created for yourself. So I just take them from, this is the change that I want, because anytime you are taking on a new goal or anything that you want to do, usually I ask them, well, what behaviors do you need in order to, what new ways of living do you need in order to achieve those goals? But before you even get there, it's, what's the mindset you need to have? And that means, what beliefs are underlying my actions and my choices. And when we look at the way we've got, where we've got to now, we can really, it becomes easier to identify sort of what beliefs are fundamentally behind those strategies that we're having in life. And so that's a lot of what the process that I work with people on is. I looked at how we can fundamentally change the beliefs so they're supporting. In some cases, it's helpful to ask yourself, is that belief true, right? But in most cases, you can't prove that a belief is true or not. There's certainly beliefs that you have about yourself that are clearly, if you think you're not worthy or you're not good enough, there are ways to dispute that, right? You can prove that to yourself. But in many ways, we just have to have faith. We don't have all the answers in life. So in those situations, I ask people to look at, does the belief have utility? Is it useful for you? Does it serve you, right? And so whether it's a spiritual belief, whether it's a belief about yourself or about society, asking yourself, does that serve me? And I found for myself having having positive beliefs that support belief in myself, in sports, right? I used to say to my players, what was the difference? And this is going back, this is, another generation, but Jordan, everybody still remembers. I used to say, like Kobe or Jordan, what's the difference between those guys and the last guy on the bench? They've got to be great athletes. They've got to be super successful to even make that level of basketball. And yet, two very different outcomes. And the difference is, Kobe and Jordan always believed they could hit every shot they took, right? So it's a mindset, it's a belief in yourself. And so I think having those kind of positive beliefs about yourself, having some faith in other people, I'm not talking about being naive, and having a general belief that, life works out for you. Sure, there are things in your way, and those resistance or those challenges you'll learn from, but you can, believing that you have all the tools to overcome every challenge that you face is just such a fundamentally important belief. So beliefs is just such an important piece of the whole equation when it comes to success, in my view.
Yeah, and finding those beliefs, it's interesting because you said, does that belief serve me? I was also thinking when sometimes we have these beliefs that you could also ask the question, could there be another way? All it has to be is one other way. If there is, then that means you still have a choice in that belief or that value. And I believe sometimes many have stuck on a value or a belief, and it puts them down a particular road, and they're like, that's the only way. And you're like, no, could it be that there are other ways? And I believe if asking those questions help to try to clarify, and then also get you to a place where you can believe that I can make it and I can do these extraordinary things in life. How does who you have around you play into, after you've kind of started to break free of those limiting beliefs and particularly maybe habits? How does that play into who you end up becoming?
How do people that are around you influence that?
Yeah,
because I think that the people, we are, they say that you're most like the top 5 people you spend the most time with. I look at, in terms of where our beliefs come from, I look at things in terms of experience. I look at it in terms of environment and repetitive thought. Those are the 3 areas I look at when we're looking to change our beliefs. And the thing is, the people around us are part of our environment. And so when you have, it goes back to what we were saying, the negative inputs that you have. But if you surround yourself with people that are successful in the way that you want to be successful, that have strong values, that that you can recognize they're acting out of love more than fear, that you can recognize that they have a strong belief in themselves, they've developed good habits. We tend to adapt and adjust our perspectives and our ways of being when we're surrounded by those kind of people. It's really difficult to change when, like, if someone's an alcoholic and they're surrounded by people who consume a lot of alcohol, they're never going to be able to make that change. But if you then surround yourself with people that have completely different habits and ways of being, that reinforces the beliefs that you're trying to internalize. And so that's why I'm glad you asked the question and made the point, because that is, as much as the media you listen to or all the other influences that are around you, the people are such an important component of that part of your life. And I used to wonder, when I saw religious people that only wanted to hang out with people from their church, and I didn't understand that. Don't you want to have different perspectives? I understand it much better now, because they've surrounded themselves with people that support each other in what they believe, and so on. And it's not being in a bubble, but as long as the beliefs that you believe serve you and support you and lead to positive outcomes, then that's the only measure I need for whether or not the belief is a good one or not. And people are such an important part of that.
Yeah, it's interesting because it can be very difficult to say, maybe sometimes we're putting ourselves in situations or around people because of a belief or a value that we had, and it can become circular in nature. But when you start to break free of those beliefs, sometimes what happens also, the relationships that are around you may change.
Yes.
And the people around you may change because you are now thinking differently and wanting to associate with others that can support that type of thinking. And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the people that you had been around before. It's just that they're not thinking the same way you're thinking now. And that's an encouragement to anyone that you can, as you're breaking free, the dynamics of your relationships may change. However, that doesn't mean anything bad. It just means that now you are thinking on ways that, is this serving me? Is this relationship serving me? Yeah. Is this thinking serving me? Or are we moving in the direction that is really getting me to the goals? And you talked about doing that as a coach, being able to help others really discover that place in their lives. So how is it that you help people find their highest potential? And now that you've kind of talked about, I love how you kind of broke it down. You said it's sometimes our experiences, sometimes our environment, and then sometimes it's these repetitive thoughts. And I think they all feed each other, sounds like. But how do you also get clients to believe, now they believe I probably can do it, but how do you push them to get it? Is it you pushing them, or how does that really work?
Well, a lot of times it starts with people have certain truth within them. You help people find the answers that they already have. Either they don't believe them, or they're you're asking questions that they either haven't thought to ask or aren't willing to ask themselves. And so by doing that, we uncover some of their potential and some of the things that they've been overlooking. And then from there, we put a lot of roadblocks in our own way. You could talk to people about the challenges they've faced, and the biggest challenges are the ones they've created for themselves. Whether it's because they've associated with the wrong people, or they've done things habitually from the past that they know no longer serve them. So it's overcoming those barriers, and beliefs are a big part of that. So when we talk about experiences, for example, as a an influence on people's beliefs, I often use the example of someone may have a fear of public speaking because they had maybe a bad experience or whatever. So what do? We start with a small group of people. We and then you get better, and then you take a bigger group of people until you sort of progress and excel. You can do it in sports or whatever. But basically, what you're doing is having new experiences. So you're negating those old experiences by having new ones. And that's a big impact on what you believe. So whether it's from the environment that you have, but then surrounding yourself with those people who have the behaviors that you want, that you strive for. Also, through that interaction, you have new experiences that also foster new beliefs, right? And then the last piece is that sort of the habitual ways of thinking, so repetitive thought. And there I have I use affirmations and a few other tricks to help internalize new ways of thinking, right? Because I always like to talk about when your brain is this network, and you have these, your neurons have these connections, and when you continue to have a certain way of thinking, that's these neurons that have connected and fire and wired together. And the thing is, in order to break them, you have to stop thinking those thoughts repetitively. So it's like you're walking through the forest where you've walked this path, for many days of your life, and you're trying to walk this new path. And at first it's difficult, but if you do it, you'll create a new path, and the old path will grow over. And that's the analogy I like to give for the sort of physical properties of your brain and developing new ways of thinking and what that accomplishes.
I like that you've now connected how our brain works and the neurons, and I like the path because that provides us with a very great visual of we can change. And of course, through neuroplasticity, we know that it has been proven scientifically that we can change in who we are. And a big part of how we change is through what we do repetitively and what we practice. So, whether it's the athlete practicing all the time, that thing becomes a habit because now you can dribble without looking and do all of these things because you repetitively practiced it. It became a habit, and it's almost as if it's just natural to what you do. And we can do the same thing with our thinking. Now, as we're moving along and we're getting close to the end of this great conversation, you said people sometimes put obstacles in their own way. And you've explained a couple of ways. What would be a common way for someone to, number one, maybe identify the obstacles that they see and then just remove them in their lives?
Yeah, it's usually, it depends on if it's something that you're doing, either whether it's a physical habit that you're performing or it's a mental one. When you recognize, first of all, it takes a certain degree of self-reflection. So if it's a mental thing, so if there's a belief that you think may be standing in the way of what you're doing or the habits that you have, a great way that it's through the coaching process. Having the conversations is a great way to reflect, but not everybody has a coach with them every day to help work with them. So I find journaling is a really great tool. And so when you really are, this is the thing about meditation. Meditation helps you take a step back and become separate from your thoughts and beliefs. So it actually helps you reflect because you can. And the same thing when you put your words to paper and you recognize, the words that you're using and the statements that you're making, you can start asking, are those true, or do those help me, and so on. And then look at the words am I using. Are they negative or are they positive and supportive? Is there gratitude and appreciation with them? So I find that process is a really helpful one to recognize, first of all, where do I see, what belief is behind these statements that I'm making? That's a really good place to start. And then from there, it's creating a habit, because it's all about what is a habit. It's just these things that you've internalized so that you don't have to think about doing them. Just like when you first learned how to drive a car, you had to think about, got to check my mirrors, got to do this, got to check over my shoulder. And now we're talking on the phone. We're not even thinking about those things that we internalized. And so it's about getting to the point where these habits that you want, or these ways of thinking that you want to get to, internalizing to them to a point that they just happen automatically. And that takes time. And that's why what you mentioned before, patience is the key. It's just continuing to do something repetitively until it's internalized, and until you recognize, I didn't even have to think about it. That just came automatically, right? And it's important to remember that, there's different theories about how long it takes for a habit to take hold. But one of the theories is it's about 28 days. And so when you think about it, if it takes you a month to develop a new habit, then don't try and change all your habits at once. At the very best, you'll be able to change 12 habits a year, and we have lots of little habits that all accumulate to the sort of behaviors that we exhibit on a daily basis. So find one, start with that until you're successful at it. Keep at it, have some patience, and then and some determination, and then once that changes, then move on to the next one. And you can make a list for yourself. Like if I coach people and they want to they have a goal that they want to get to, and we look at the different habits that they need to achieve it, I make sure they don't try and do more than 6 habits in the course of the year, because sometimes it's just one habit that's really deep seated that you need to spend a lot more time working on. So yeah, those are just a few things that I recommend people do to sort of get them on their way.
All right, Peter, we're at the end. What would you want someone to know and see as you leave a legacy, and with all of the work and all of what you've done? What would that look like to them that you're wanting to leave as a legacy to this world?
I'm honestly not that worried about legacy. I do hope that if people have had any kind of contact with me, that they've either been inspired to change through something I've said, something they've read from me. So for me, I've written a book. If just one person has this life-changing or has an important inspiration from that, then writing the book is worth it, right? So for every one person that can benefit from it. And at the end of the day, the book is called Rethinking Happiness. I think if I can inspire people to find new ways to find joy and happiness in their life, then I'll be super happy, because I think that happy people tend to be better partners, better neighbors, citizens, parents. When we have this authentic happiness, we will be better people. And so that's why I hope, if it needs to be a legacy, I hope I'm the guy that helped more people live a happier life.
Well, Peter, thank you for sharing such wisdom from all the way from Germany. Right? I love it. And if you could share with my audience, how can they get in contact with you to get some more of this great information and connect with you?
Sure. The easiest way is through my website, and that's peterteuscher.com, and the name is spelled Peter Teuscher.com. That's where you can read my weekly blog. You can find out about where to buy my book, and there's links to these kind of interviews that I'm doing with you, and any of the other stuff that I've done on YouTube. So that's the easiest place to find me.
Peter, thanks. Wonderful information. I have taken all of it in and taken great information away of understanding that we're going to have these experiences, the environments that are around us, those repetitive thoughts. You've given us some tangible ways to be able to work through and to really get into a place of rethinking how we live and have a happier life, and also putting in the place maybe some of these habits and things that will help us along this journey, help us transform, help us have that joy, help us to really share that with everyone around us. My encouragement, of course, to everyone that's listening, that you continue to take all of what we talked about, and most of all, that you will produce on purpose.